We're fairly sure on this President's Day Eve that the story of a young George Washington chopping down a cherry tree is a myth. Which brings us to this morning's mystery. Did George Washington love Mary Philipse? Our cover story is reported by Jim Axelrod.
When it comes to the familiar portrait of the father of our country, the model of virtue and resolve, who could not tell a lie.
He stroked the side of her face. He felt her shiver.
Maybe, just maybe, we didn't get the whole picture.
He felt her relax in his arms, soften.
It turns out, a few years before Martha,
Mary Eliza Philipse, my fond heart overflows with joy to see you. She smiled and her lips trembled.
there was Mary.
This is a massive amount of land that Mary owns.
Her family owned 250,000 acres of land all along the Hudson River.
In her debut novel, Dear George, Dear Mary, author Mary Calvi writes of Washington's first love, Mary Eliza Philipse, one of the wealthiest women in the colonies.
What do we learn? Couldn't tell a lie, cross the Delaware, Martha. There's never any mention of Mary Philipse.
Why is that? Why has she been forgotten? In the 1800s, she's written in every book there is that I could find about George Washington, and yet since then, I feel like she's sort of been left out of history.
Calvi wants to put her back with a love story that begins in 1756 as the newly minted French and Indian war hero, Colonel George Washington, is passing through New York. He stops for a party in his honor, possibly at Philipse Manor, a mansion in Yonkers. When he meets the heiress who lives there, sparks fly.
Was George Washington sexy?
George Washington was a stud back in the 1700s. Are you kidding? Women wanted a touch of him, is what was said.
But Washington's sense of duty to the King of England trumped Cupid.
If this guy has fallen for this heiress, why doesn't he make plans to take some leave, go check on this potential love of your life?
George Washington requests time off, 10 days, 12 days, 14 days, and he writes to his commanders. He's denied every time.
When Mary married a British officer, Roger Morris, 2 years later, Washington quit his command, perhaps, according to Mary Calvi, changing the course of history.
They really took away his freedoms to be able to follow his heart.
It's a story that has long fascinated Calvi, who, like Mary Philipse, grew up in Yonkers, and where she's the First Lady, married to the mayor, Mike Spano.
When my husband was inaugurated as mayor, I asked the question, isn't it true that George Washington once courted the heiress who lived here? It was urban legend. And when we couldn't find the answers and substantiate that story, I said, well, let me try to research it on my own.
For 3.5 years, Calvi sorted through thousands of letters, publications, and journal entries.
This is CBS 2 News.
In her spare time, since she already had a day job, Calvi is an anchor at the CBS station in New York City.
This is not what I do for a living. So I had all of the research done, and I thought, well, let me just give it a shot.
She wanted her work of fiction backed up by as many facts as she could find, though she didn't always like where those facts took her.
This is exactly the room.
Like to this mansion in Harlem. In 1776, 20 years after George and Mary's relationship failed to blossom, Washington, outmanned and under-resourced, was fighting to keep the British from capturing Manhattan. The mansion, perched on the highest point in the city, made a perfect headquarters.
You'd see the New York Harbor, you'll see the Harlem River, you'll see Hudson River, and so if you were looking for the enemy, you would see them coming from here.
And the mansion was owned by none other than Mary Philipse.
Where was Mary Philipse when George Washington decided to move in?
So that's such a good question. That's what I went into the documents to try to figure out.
Things were getting even more complicated for both Marys. Philipse, and Calvi. The author knew that Martha Washington was back in Virginia for her own safety, and that Philip's husband was in England. No one knows for sure where Mary Philipse was, but Calvi had an idea.
She wasn't upstate with her sister, and she wasn't in Yonkers with her brother. So it is possible that George Washington moved into a mansion in Harlem in which his first love was living in at the time.
Hang on. George Washington is here, living in a bedroom down the hall, using this as his office,
Yes.
at the same time
Yes.
that his first love may very well be living in this house?
I know what you're saying, and I know what you're thinking, and that's what I could see in the documents.
You really could see, if you were here, this makes a lot of sense as headquarters, right?
Yeah.
Historian Richard Brookhiser, one of the world's preeminent George Washington scholars, confirms George and Mary Philipse were an item in 1756, but says while historical fiction is one thing,
Is it possible they shared this house?
We don't have any evidence of it.
historical fact is quite another.
I think she's found a possibility for a good work of fiction. Until we find some letter, "Dear Mary, so nice to see you after so many decades," it's not going to enter the historical record.
Not saying it didn't happen, just saying we can't say it did happen. There are rigorous standards for something to enter the historical record.
That's right.
And this doesn't get over that bar.
Not yet. We can still look.
Still, as we mark the 287th birthday of George Washington, Mary Calvi has a story that seeks to liberate the historical figure from the marble that so often encases his legacy.
You look almost pained to say that.
I was so torn when I found this information out. I was really in a bit of a quandary, truthfully, as to what to do with this information.
Because you didn't want to be the one suggesting that George Washington, the father of our country, was carrying on?
Well, because I'm the first one to say it, there's something really uncomfortable about that for me. Night turned to dawn. She had fallen asleep in his arms. The last small flame was burning out in the hearth. He walked over to the fireplace, placed white birch logs into it, and waited to be assured the glow did not go dark.